See, obviously Tino has done this before and he knows how to climb it, you know, to the side, as opposed to me, who's just like walking straight up. Simply stunning. Hey everyone, I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries. Welcome back to my Latin America Diaries. After leaving Oaxaca, the next destination was Chiapas, Mexico's southernmost state and also one of its most vivid. The bus drive was a long one, leaving at around 10 a.m. and arriving in an intermediate city called Juchitán at about 3:30 p.m., then leaving Juchitán at 7 p.m. and arriving in the city of San Cristóbal de las Casas in Chiapas at 1 a.m. This bus journey went perfectly well. The same can't be said, however, for the next bus journey, where our bus got stopped by people who I think were members of a paramilitary, and my visa was scrutinized. Want to know how that story ended? Stick around. But in the meantime, make sure that you like this video, subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive updates when I upload new videos in this series. And if you like what you're seeing, please share my content and tell your friends and family about it. It would really mean a lot to me. So I'll get to the expired visa thing in a minute. But while I was in San Cristóbal de las Casas, I was couch surfing again and staying at the home of Gabriel, a friend who I had met through couch surfing. San Cristóbal de las Casas is a perfect example of how varied the landscapes in Mexico are. At 2,200 meters above sea level, the air is fresh and the surrounding mountains are often covered in cloud. Perfect conditions for growing coffee and cacao. Needless to say, this is a city that knows how to live well. Hola, muchas gracias. This is the coffee that I have been served, and it is apparently local. It does say the Niebla de los Altos Chiapas, which, Chiapas being the state that I'm in, the state of Mexico that I'm in, not as in the state as in the condition that I'm in. And if we turn this around, it's going to tell me a little bit about the coffee. So here we go, we're really going to test my Spanish here. Secado al sol means dried in the sun. Variety typical of the New World. So the New World obviously referring to the Americas. And then notes here we have aroma floral, notas a miel, so that's floral aromas, notes of honey, chocolate and red fruits. So I'm getting the floral aroma, actually. Yeah, like really. Can't quite tell which flowers actually, but it's definitely, I don't know, it's like sparkly or something. It's like sparkly on the nose. See, this is the thing, right? The coffee that we drink in cities, in non-coffee producing countries, a lot of the time, and possibly even in coffee producing countries, because I've seen a lot of Nescafe in Mexico, the coffee that we drink actually tastes so different to this and what real coffee should taste like. This is, it's like a brew. It's like a real brew. It doesn't taste just like, someone's got a dog over here. I'm getting, I get the notes of honey in there because it's kind of like, you know how honey has like, and again, not sort of like, honey which is too sugary, but honey which is like, it's got like that depth to it. It's sort of got that, it's almost like a nectar, I guess, so I can taste that. And then chocolate, yes, I can taste it sort of on the back of my tongue, but it's not, again, not sweet chocolate, it's sort of like the taste of cocoa, which again sort of reflects the earth in which the soil is, the soil in the earth in which the coffee is grown. And then frutos rojos. I think with frutos rojos, which is red fruits, it's sort of, you know how stone fruits, especially if they're not super ripe, you know how stone fruits sometimes have kind of like a bit of an astringent or earthy or something like that sort of taste on the back of the tongue. I'm thinking like apricots that are just not quite ripe. I'm getting that from the coffee as well. San Cristóbal is known for its traditional architecture. some of which dates back to the 16th century. The city is considered the cultural capital of Chiapas. Looking at the map, you'll notice that the southern end of Chiapas shares a border with Guatemala. Later in my journey, when I was in Guatemala, and particularly in the city of Quetzaltenango, I was able to notice these similarities between the cities and the cultures on both sides of the border. Like Oaxaca, Chiapas, and particularly San Cristóbal, has a rich culinary tradition. Here we are going to be trying a local type of Chiapas. I think it's Chiapas. I could be very wrong. It's a type of traditional dish from here, a type of mole, which is similar. I mean, mole is something that I tasted in Oaxaca, but now I'm tasting the Chiapas version of it with chicken. I believe it's chicken breast in there. Okay, so the main thing about mole is, of course, the sauce. I mean, that is the name of the sauce. I'll get to the chicken in a minute, but for now, it's time to taste the sauce. Okay, did you see that? So that was, first of all, different to the one in Oaxaca. This is not a sweet, actually. It's sort of almost like it's really earthy and a bit bitter, almost. Really savory as well. But then the second thing that hit me was that as you swallow it, you get like this hit of spice at the back of the throat. And I think it's not chili. Maybe it is, but it's definitely like, I can taste cinnamon and black pepper in there. This is good. This almost reminds me a little bit of like southern Chinese cooking or Thai cooking or something, or maybe even Indian. There are spices in there. There's sesame. So I mean that's like the East Asian influence. But then like when I think of like Indian cooking with like, you know, curries or salams as we call it in Pakistan, you know, that sort of like really thick flavor, and then with the chicken, perfect. There's also these tortillas which are not, I believe, made with maize, which is traditional in other parts of Mexico. They're made with another grain. I'm assuming that we can dip a bit of that in there. It's different, really different. I need to find out what that grain is. There's actually this thing I read where they said that there used to be like 30 or 40 different types of grain that you could make bread or staple, you know, carbs with, basically. So rice, corn, wheat, that kind of thing. There used to be 30 or 40 different types around the world, and now in the modern world we've basically reduced that to 3, which are corn, wheat and rice. There are a few other ones, of course, but I mean they're the main ones. But this, I believe, is from a local grain which is not maize, corn, and it dates back to pre-Hispanic times, so you know, before all of those were ripped away from the world's cultural culinary fabric. And then to drink, I have this drink here, which again, I'm so bad at this, but I did not write down the name of it because I only basically pointed to it on the menu. But it is a cocoa and maize drink, which is again traditional from this area. It looks like this, and it's served in this pot, and it's cold. And I'm imagining that it might taste a bit like tejate from Oaxaca, because it looks similar to that, but also at the same time it doesn't. So I'm thinking that it might be a bit like a chocolate smoothie kind of thing, but I can see that it's made from water. Like if you look around the edge of this here, basically there is sort of like, I think that all that is just cocoa floating to the top, and it's actually quite watery underneath. You know, it's interesting how corn is so sweet, because I can taste maize in there. And it's interesting how it's sort of like got like a sweet, I mean, I know there's brown sugar in there as well, but there is sort of like I don't know, like a corny sweetness to that, as well as the cocoa which is in there. It's really refreshing, actually. I can imagine that even maybe, I don't know if it could be served with a bit of ice, sort of on the streets on a hot afternoon. Really yummy. Gabriel, my couch surfing host, is the man and the mind behind Belisario Enoteca. And while I was in San Cristóbal, it was the bar's 2nd anniversary, and he invited me along to the celebration. Gabriel even sang a bit himself.
mariposas de color, fantasías en cualquier esquina, yo sin su amor.
As did his father.
Quiero que vuelvas a mí, yo necesito de ti. Es tan difícil vivir.
And then, after my brief stop in San Cristóbal de las Casas, it was time to move on. Although it's only just over 200 kilometers, most buses don't travel directly between San Cristóbal and Palenque. Instead, they take a more circuitous route via Tuxtla Gutiérrez and Villahermosa, which doubles the distance. I believe it's because the roads are in better condition along this route. And somewhere on the road, just before Puente Chiapas, our bus was stopped by men in uniform. I'm not entirely sure whether they were officials or not, but I'm leaning towards not because the fatigues that they were wearing were different to the ones that I had seen on security personnel elsewhere in Mexico. As well as that, I had been warned that the state of Chiapas can be a little lawless and that there are certain groups operating in Chiapas that somehow control the highways and that shakedowns are not uncommon. So with that background, I was sort of prepared for what was about to happen. Once our bus had stopped, a man and a woman boarded the bus and started checking our identity documents. They were ID cards for locals and passports and visas for foreigners. Once they reached me, they asked me to get off the bus along with about 4 or 5 other people. I wasn't sure exactly what they wanted at this point, but I knew that I hadn't done anything wrong, so I just got off the bus and cooperated. The male soldier introduced me to his superior, who I have to say was quite friendly. He asked to see my luggage, so I took my luggage off the bus and he checked it, and when he didn't find anything, he turned his attention to my passport. He told me that my visa was expired, but I told him that that wasn't possible because on an Australian passport, I'm entitled to 90 days stay in Mexico, 90 days from the date of arrival, and that I had arrived only 3 weeks earlier. I had a feeling that he was looking for a bribe, but I also knew that I hadn't done anything wrong, so I wasn't going to give in that easily. Eventually, when that line of questioning about my visa failed, he turned his attention elsewhere and he basically just told me that my visa was not valid because the visa stamp in my passport was green and the color on the cover of my passport was blue. Because they didn't match, I had to pay a fine. There it was. I figured that I'd just have to pay the fine or bribe to proceed. So I asked him, how much is the fine? And he asked me how much I had in my wallet. Luckily, in preparation for this moment, I had already taken most of the cash out of my wallet, so I looked inside and there was 500 pesos. I told him that and he said, well, the fine is 500 pesos. So he quite literally took the money straight out of my wallet. I loaded my bag back onto the bus, I returned to my seat, a bit pissed off, but with nothing damaged except my ego. As I was walking away, he did say something to me a bit darkly, like, that visa is still a problem. And I was just like, whatever. As the bus pulled out, I sat back in my seat, opened my passport, and looked at my visa one last time, and that's when I saw it. My visa had in fact expired on the 4th of November. This was on the 17th of November, so I was almost 2 weeks over. So here's how it works. For many, many years, Australian passport holders, along with many other nationalities, automatically got a stamp in their passport on arrival in Mexico, which gave them 90 or 180 days validity to remain in Mexico. However, in 2024, this changed, and now these same nationalities get up to 180 days stay in Mexico. However, the actual duration of your visa validity is determined by the immigration official who stamps your passport at the airport or the border post. They decide the length of validity by asking for the date that you plan to leave Mexico. In my case, when I arrived on the 26th of October in the international airport at Mexico City, the immigration official asked me for my flight details to depart Mexico, which had already been pre-booked for the 29th of November. So under normal circumstances, she would have written that the visa would expire a few days later, say the 4th of December, which is the 4th of the 12th. Instead, she wrote the 4th of the 11th. I know that this was a mistake because although I didn't notice it at the time, she wrote that date in my passport immediately after I showed her evidence of my flight out on the 29th of November, and I have no reason to be given a shorter time frame. The moral of the story here is that when you're arriving in Mexico, don't assume. Always check the date written on the stamp before you leave the passport counter, and if it's not correct, ask if there's a reason why you were given a shorter time frame or if it is indeed just a genuine mistake. Luckily, I had all this evidence on my side, but I was still a bit worried. I mean, what if the next person to check my passport was a real policeman and not someone who only wanted $50? In retrospect, I think I kind of lucked out there. I contacted a local immigration lawyer in Mexico who had been recommended to me, and he advised me that my status in Mexico was irregular, not illegally overstaying. He did say that it would be possible to fix this by paying a $40 fine at the airport when I'm leaving. And he also wrote me a letter in Spanish that I could present to any officials who might question me in the meantime. However, he did also say that I would need to be careful and, if possible, travel by train rather than by bus or flight, which would be more scrutinized and more prone to security checks. I eventually arrived in Palenque at about 7 p.m. and met my friend Tino, who took me back to his family home for dinner. I stayed with Tino and his lovely family for a few days, and they were just so generous. Like seriously, they are some of the kindest people that I met on my entire travels. However, this also presented a bit of a challenge to me because not a lot of English is spoken in Tino's household, and this would be the longest that I would be in a setting where I had to speak Spanish up until that point. This was an important process for me though, because on my first week in Mexico, someone had made a rude remark to me about how basic my Spanish was. At the time, I just shook it off, but I know that my confidence took a hit, and it took me time to get back to where I was. A couple of days with Tino's family, speaking Spanish with friendly faces and kind encouragement, it really helped. And Tino, if you're watching this, I just want to say thank you. Not just for your generous hospitality, but also for giving me the confidence to continue speaking Spanish. The whole region of Chiapas was an important center of the Mayan Empire, and the town of Palenque is home to some of the most extensive Mayan ruins in Mexico. We were heading to the ruins of Palenque on the second day of my visit there, but on the first day, we took a tour out to the town of Frontera Corozal on the Usumacinta River to visit the long-lost ruins of Yaxchilán. We have arrived at, ¿cuál es el nombre de este pueblo?
Es Frontera Corozal.
Frontera Corozal. Basically, it's right next to the river, which we will be traveling down to get to Yaxchilán. ¿Es tu primera vez aquí o
Segunda.
Segunda. Basically on this boat heading towards the ruins of Yaxchilán, and I'll tell you more about that when we actually get there. But the interesting thing about this river is that this is actually the border between Mexico and Guatemala. So that behind me, which we just we got on from this shore, the bank of the river behind me, that is Mexico. But if I spin this around, that bank over there is Guatemala. That's pretty cool. This was so exciting. It was like an expedition into the wilderness. So we just landed at Yaxchilán, which is, as you saw, about 30 minutes up the river from the town where we got dropped off, and it was a beautiful boat ride up here actually. But this place, I mean, we have landed in the middle of the jungle. Look at this. Because of how this place is, we have been advised to wear lots of mosquito repellent, so that happened actually back at the port before we got onto the boat. Wow. I don't think I've ever been anywhere quite like this actually. This is how I imagine potentially like the rainforests of northern Australia to be, but I haven't been there. what's incredible about this place is not just that it is all here, like out here literally in the middle of nowhere, although obviously once upon a time this wasn't the middle of nowhere, but also just how everything here is just sort of sitting here and like covered in moss. It's like sort of you're watching a city that's slowly being taken back by nature in real time. It's incredible and slippery. The thing about Yaxchilán is that it wasn't actually a sort of like a capital of the Mayan Empire or anything like that, but it was a major city about 1,200 to 1,400 years ago. So it's believed that it was deserted around 1,200 years ago, and ever since then has lay in ruin, and it was only rediscovered by I'm not sure, actually, archaeologists. It was only rediscovered in recent times. The other thing to know about Yaxchilán is that it is very, very humid out here. Bring water because you will need it. It's, I mean, it is warm. It's not like the temperature's not really high, but the humidity is just crazy. There are other times of year that are probably a bit less humid, but then the heat would make up for it. So really, I guess it's up to you what you prefer. So we've just arrived at Bonampak, which is another Mayan Empire civilization ruin, and this one is apparently much smaller than Yaxchilán, but equally, I've been told, like equally impressive, but for different reasons. Apparently there are murals here that we have to see. Sí, ¿es tu primera vez aquí?
Segundo.
Segundo, lo mismo de Yaxchilán, sí. So we are going to take a look at this now. This, honestly, I didn't know that much about Bonampak before the tour, before it was included in the tour. But this should be interesting. We took Tulum Tour Company to take us to Yaxchilán, and I would have no hesitation in recommending them. Everything was provided, and it was a very comfortable departure, tour, and return to Palenque. The next morning, tired though we were, Tino and I made our way through the morning heat and humidity to the ruins of Palenque. Palenque, everything is like the monuments are actually all together in groups, and we've reached the first group, which is actually also the one that houses or hosts the biggest monument, and that is the Temple of the Inscriptions. And it is apparently one of the most celebrated and one of the most, I guess, iconic or notable ruins in North America. And to be honest, it is pretty impressive. Like, it's huge. Take a look at this. So, I mean, that's it there, right? But then I don't think this is part of it, but it is massive. And there are steps that go up. And apparently at the top there are like 25 rooms, I believe, as part of this tomb. This is El Palacio, and this was once the palace, presumably, of the local royalty in the Mayan Empire. We are about to go inside of this temple or tomb. It's a tomb, actually, inside of this tomb here. And apparently inside of this one, you can actually get all the way inside. So this is the tomb of La Reina Roja, which means basically the tomb of the Red Queen, and presumably was the tomb of one of the Mayan queens, or perhaps local queens, during the Mayan era, and she is buried in here. On this very hot, humid day, Tino and I are about to climb up to the top of this temple, which Templo de la Cruz. Okay, so it's basically the Temple of the Cross. Here goes. See, obviously Tino has done this before and he knows how to climb it, you know, to the side, as opposed to me, who's just like walking straight up. This place was simply stunning. Ricardo got his happy snap here at Palenque too. So one interesting thing that I've been told is that Palenque is in a way not finished, and that's because archaeologists are still excavating parts of this site. And that's, I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but there are like drills going, or maybe even chainsaws. And if you look up there, you can actually see where bits of the site are still being excavated for, I mean, I guess future study and visitors as well. So I mean, there's a chance that if you were to come here in a couple of years, you may be able to walk up there and see a part of Palenque that has only just been rediscovered. On the last night with Tino's family, we celebrated my birthday for the second time in Mexico. The first time had been back in Mexico City with Andrea, with a traditional Mexican corn cake. And here we were dividing up the Latin American favorite, tres leches. The next morning, I headed to the railway station in Palenque and boarded the Tren Maya towards the Yucatan Peninsula and my final week in Mexico. Don't forget to subscribe, because that is next time in my Latin America diaries.